Hi, I'm Mark Montgomery. I'm founder and CEO of KYield. This is a recording. I'm going to walk you through a paper that we just released on enterprise AI operating systems. So we're pioneers in this area. Our flagship system, the KOS, is an enterprise AI operating system, and not to be confused with a computer operating system, but actually it's an organizational operating system. And so in our case, it is a human-centric organizational operating system that is very much data-centric in its structure. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to share my screen. And we'll begin with the introduction. This is a very compressed paper, unusually compressed. Spent a little extra time doing so. So there's a lot of information in a few short pages, and we're using the same format that I used in our previous paper, and also recorded a video walking through that paper, and that was introducing generative AI to the KOS. And in that format, this is using the same format, received good feedback on that. People liked it. So that's why we're continuing with the format, a combination of a paper and then walking through with a video talk. And I'm going to attempt to be a little briefer this time, although it's a very condensed topic. So it's difficult to do, but I'll do my best. So what is an EAI operating system anyhow? All right, and why are they becoming essential? So to go back in time a little bit, some background on it. For those that are not familiar with KYield, we started 26 years ago, R&D, and I was running a small lab and running multiple learning networks, right? And two that became leaders. One was for small business, and the second one was for thought leaders. And it was while I was running the second one that I came up with a theorem, the KYield theorem, which is yield management of knowledge. And that is a combination of mathematics. It took me a long time to be able to express it in mathematical equation, but it also includes social. It's very much a multidisciplinary effort. And as time went on, and patents and that sort of thing, it was classified as an AI system. So that's gives you some background. It wasn't until the 2000s, early 2000s, when I was designing a system to execute the theorem, the KYield theorem, that I realized in our research that we're actually creating a new type of operating system. So that's when I started to use the term, because it was accurate, right? It was accurately describing what we were doing. And although it was a different type than other operating systems, so it caused some confusion, but it's nonetheless accurate, right? And so we kept on doing it and let the evidence guide us. And so originally called it the KYield OS, and later on abbreviated to KOS. And to my awareness, it was the first enterprise AI operating system. So not to be confused with the computer OS or other types of operating systems, an enterprise AI operating system, and by our definition, the way we use it in the KOS, is an organizational OS, right? And it should seek to unify the distributed work environment and culture, and include easy-to-use governance that's adaptive to changing needs, and provide strong security, accelerate learning, and embed enhanced productivity across the digital workplace. So those are sort of minimal functions that I would expect from an EAI operating system. And we'll go into detail more on the generic EAI OS, and then specifically our KOS a bit later on. And so we also introduce a new twist to an old concept in complexity science in this paper. And that is regarding complex adaptive systems. So by its very nature, if it's done properly, an enterprise AI operating system will be adaptive, right? That's one of the reasons you have it, is so that your organization can be competitive and adapt to change. And so we introduce a new concept here that is a complex adaptive organizational system, or chaos, CAOS. And then in order to manage that properly, you need a enterprise AI operating system. So we'll go into that a little bit. And the goal of our KOS is to achieve a continuously adaptive learning organization, right? And so we have a whole page on that and a chapter on it. So the perfect example of why you need one of the more extreme examples in our lifetimes, why you need a very adaptive organization and systems to execute adaptation was, of course, during the COVID pandemic. We had complete lockdowns and then openings and lockdowns and supply chain problems, and we all lived it, so we all realized how much chaos there actually was. But even a small percentage of employees working from home or in hybrid form sort of radically changes profound implications for office workers, lenders, cities, and businesses. So came across this quote recently in the CEO Daily newsletter that is published by Alan Murray, CEO of Fortune. And it's by the CEO of Eli Lilly, Dave Ricks. And he says that the leadership challenge of our decade is if you want them all to feel part of something bigger than themselves, how do you bring that together in a way that seems both fair and productive? So it's talking about work from home and the balance between needing to get people together, physically. So fortunately, we're now in a position with the emergence of EAI operating systems to greatly improve fairness and productivity in the digital workplace, among other values, no matter where they're located. And so, remote distributed work is nothing new, right? Executives have been traveling and working over computers for decades. In the 1980s, really, road warriors became expert in working over computer networks earlier than most. And then, of course, we've had remote service technicians even before that, before the internet, to some degree, working over some types of computer systems remotely. So it's not a new concept. And of course, there's many other reasons why you need a system like this, no matter if you're physically in the office or otherwise, because your supply chains are distributed around the world, and increasingly e-commerce and partners and many other reasons why you need an enterprise AI operating system. So different types of EAI operating systems. So we'll go into that a little bit. For those that just discovering the concept, it may be surprising to discover that the concept has been around for decades, right? At least in terms of AI and operating systems, not necessarily organizational operating systems, but although that has been around for a while too. But combining organizational operating systems with artificial intelligence operating systems is really sort of a new phenomenon. We weren't able to execute it well until now, basically. So ran across some of this interesting in Brett Fleisch in a paper in 1983. He asked the questions: can we build an operating system that is really intelligent? What would such an intelligent system do? How would it act? Would it be different? An adaptive system, he suggests. Would it be better? So this is not an organizational system, but he's asking these questions about an operating system powered by artificial intelligence. And this is interesting to me because it was in 1984, a year later, that I first became interested in artificial intelligence. It was having a moment back in those days, but it was limited mostly to expert systems just because of the technical capabilities at the time. And another example here was that I came across was Dale Tanagai, at UC Berkeley. He conceived of an expert scheduler for algorithms in an OS in 1988. So here again, we have an expert system in an operating system that still has relevance today and used for automating algorithms. And then I discovered another one in researching this paper that was called the KOS. First time I'd come across it, it was in 1991 by Jean-Claude Houdin in France, and he called it the KOS, and it was a knowledge-based operating system for real-time AI to assist fighter pilots. And that was a research project funded by their defense industry. And then in 1984, a team of researchers by Etzioni and his group in Seattle in 1994 considered a goal-oriented approach using AI techniques and agents. And so those are just some examples I found in research that I found pretty interesting. Of course, you know, those are not organization or enterprise-wide, but nonetheless interesting and relevant. So in terms of business operating systems, one of the sort of triggers of the modern day was actually Doug McMillan. It was interesting because I had just written an article on enterprise AI operating systems, delivered it to most of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 are on our distribution list, including Doug. And he shortly after that came out with a statement in public saying that we need a new operating system. And he was discussing the competition with Amazon, right? How to compete with Amazon. That was a native online networked company for the most part, and highly efficient, right? And Doug, with CEO of Walmart, was managing a older legacy company that didn't have at the time. They had an e-commerce setup, but it wasn't wasn't yet competitive with Amazon. Now that has changed. And we'll talk about that quite a bit later, but you'll see an example of, at least conceptually, CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world that looking through at his business and needing a new business operating system, right? And it's certainly enhanced with AI. It's a little different. It's not as unified as our KOS, and that's but it's still. It's quite interesting, and that was one of the main sort of triggers that woke up a lot of people in business and started to look at things a little differently. And so, some other examples are Intuit very recently adopted a vertical AI operating system with GAI functionality, generative AI functionality for their specialized accounting in tax software business. And here, Ashok Srivastava, he's a CDO, the chief data officer at Intuit. He says, think of a real operating system like a Mac OS or Windows. And he says, I think this is a revolutionary idea, right? And so we agree. We've been working on it for decades. So that was kind of nice to see. So those are some examples of how businesses are using and actually executing different types of operating systems. So the vertical OS is like Intuit, and there's good examples in software and pure online because it's easier, right, to create an operating system than one that has a lot of physical components to it. But it's a vertical is obviously focused on an industry or a specialty, and I found some good a good article on this and by Joe Schmidt and Christina Shen at Andreessen Horowitz, a venture capital firm. They recently published a few months ago a good article on vertical operating systems, and they say there can only be one vertical operating system for a business, right? And the OS layer stitches together various systems of records and becomes the place an employee spends the most time completing daily activities. It runs the workflows for the entire company. Now, that is very similar to our KOS. The difference is that our KOS is generic, right? and it applies to any type of organization. And the system automatically tailors to the needs of the organization. What they are describing is a vertical operating system, primarily in software, run almost entirely online, that is sort of, rigid software for specific functions. And that's what they're talking about. And that's sort of the most common. There are some pretty good examples, and they provide a few examples in that article. So and we provide links to all these things. There's 20 different references that we provide links to during this in this paper. So when it's available, it'll be available here shortly on our website. You can check out these articles and link right to them. So organizational operating systems is another type. That's our KOS, right? And I found an interesting paper on this of Carlos Pascoa and Jose Tribole. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing these right. Describe the need for an organizational OS in their 2015 paper. Organizations are dynamic systems that run in complex environments and need to react to changes by increasing its self-awareness and its ability to transform and adapt. Failure to adapt can lead to disruption. Adaptation mechanisms need to consider the wholeness of the organization to maintain its viability and performance. Now, that's very accurately describing what our KOS is, and that is also describing what a complex adaptive organizational system is. And so we execute that with the KOS. Of course, we were working on it in the early 2000s and looking at it as an operating system, but nonetheless, it's a good paper. And again, we provide links, and it's pretty interesting. And then, non-human centric OS, we're not going to spend much time on that, but it's a different type of operating system that could be enterprise-wide. An example of it could be all bots. You could have, monitoring and fully autonomous OS for drones, for example, router networks, and robotic process automation. Those are not organizational operating systems, but they certainly could be enterprise-wide or large scale. So those are some different types. And here we go, complex adaptive organizational system, or chaos, play on words. But if the shoe fits, right, wear it. Well, there's a lot of regardless how good of manager you are, one of the things that you learn in decades of business, I've had 12 myself, and been a consultant for a decade, a VC for a decade, and a lot of research, working with hundreds, if not thousands of companies over the years, is that there's a fair amount of chaos, even for the best managers, right? So part of becoming if you look at the high performance managers, they manage change really well. So there's no question that a lot of this still is leadership. An enterprise AI operating system doesn't change that. It still need very good leadership, and in fact, I discuss in this paper that more so than ever before, the people in the organization really provide the differentiation, the competitive advantage. However, they're going to need to be augmented, right? And the whole organization is going to need to be augmented for productivity and knowledge, to accelerate knowledge, accelerate discovery. And that will be increasingly true. I mean, that's quite obvious now. We're at that point today. It took longer than I expected, but we're there today. And so, again, although the pandemic provides an extreme example of why you need an adaptive organization, and I go through here some of the timeline of the pandemics, the things that happened that caused, organizations, governments, organizations of every type, every size, all over the world had to adapt to some really radical change very fast. Everything from supply chains to lockdowns to travel restrictions. It was literally an ongoing sort of chaotic situation, reacting to the waves in the pandemic and public policy and all sorts of things. So there's no you need to be prepared for chaos, even if you have especially if you have a very well managed organization. You want to continue because things will happen. and so one example here that a quote that I found in an article at MIT SMR by Reeves and his team in 2017, he describes a complex operating environment facing modern leaders. So this is actually, this is 2.5 years before the pandemic, showing the need. It's not just the pandemic. And he says, these ecosystems are nested, complex, adaptive systems, multi-level, interconnected, dynamic systems hosting local interactions that can give rise to unpredictable global effects and vice versa. Acknowledging the unpredictability, nonlinearity, and circularity of cause and effect relationships within these systems is a notable departure from the simpler linear models that underpin traditional mechanistic management thinking. Now that's really probably the best quote that I've found describing a complex adaptive organization system, why you need one, why you need an effective one to execute your mission in an organization and remain competitive. So, and then here I just talk about one of the reasons I came to New Mexico was Santa Fe Institute, and so I was a frequent visitor there for 6-7 years, and while I was working on maturing our R&D, and it was a very good environment for us. The SFI, as we call it, is considered the world center for complexity research. It was the first one created in 1984 by a group out of Los Alamos. And when I was there, we had a robust business network with dozens of members, including some of the leading corporations, and they typically had some of their smartest engineers and smartest people that would advise senior management on these issues. But and I got to know, become friends with quite a few of them, got to know quite a few of them. And they were considering, even though we looked at complexity in all types of different things, and we weren't focused on organizational operating systems, certainly looked at. They were interested in different parts of the complexity in different parts of their industry and their company. So Wall Street firms, worried about black swan events and complexity and the risk. They're companies that were in the early stages of developing autonomous, vehicles for operations. There are all kinds of, these are many of the largest, most complex organizations in the world. And so it was a very good environment with the multidiscipline people that we would be in rooms and discuss new research and applications. And it was fairly open and cordial way to share knowledge and share research. And so it was a good environment, probably the best place in the world to mature something like this at the time. It certainly felt like it when I was there. And that's one of the reasons that came to New Mexico 13 years ago. So here we have a little chapter on EAI architecture, operating system architecture. So on the left-hand side, I'm talking about a minimal EAI OS, a well-designed end-to-end enterprise data management system that should be highly refined, include the workflow of the organization. This is, for artificial intelligence. Now people understand why with generative AI. It was surprising that until a couple of years ago, how few people were really connecting the dots between the importance of high-quality data and artificial intelligence. And really part of that is because the research was on these large language models that scraped lots of data, and it was unstructured. But in the enterprise, you really need quality, right? And the vast majority need accuracy. And so that data management system, the core, it's part of our core patent, it's part of our core system, is absolutely essential. You can't really have an effective AI system without a data management system, right? And so that's critically important. It's certainly not an enterprise-wide system. So it's going to boil down to that. Number two, the quality and accuracy of AI outputs depend on the quality and accuracy of the inputs. So the effectiveness of the enterprise operating system is largely dependent on the precision and accuracy of the quality of work, the human work, and the quality of the data within the organization. So and then third, the EAI OS is transdisciplinary. So human systems is very important, human centric. There's a lot of the architecture that relates to human systems in our KOS, and it's critically important. It represents about 40% of our R&D. So finding the appropriate talent, knowledge in a single designer or a team working together is among the greatest challenges of putting this together. And I can tell you that just from my own personal experience and all that I've had to learn over decades and the intensity of the research, 26 years just on really the KOS and related. And that was after decades of working in related fields, so in overlapping fields. So it is very much there's not very many of us in the world, let's put it that way. The number four, the EAI operating system user interface must be simple to use, engaging, and well aligned to the interests of the workforce. Tacit incentives should be made explicit. So this gets into more of the knowledge management research and what was learned decades ago in learning organizations and in knowledge management on the need for, and in this case, the AI systems are run on data, right? So if you want quality data, people need to be engaged, and they have to have incentives aligned with that engagement, so they're not withholding their knowledge. And when you have perverse incentives in an organization, it's terribly destructive and it's anti-competitive. So it's very important to have that alignment, right? Now you're hearing more about alignment in AI systems, but this is not new in our research and knowledge systems. We've been dealing with it for decades. So an effective EAI operating system that is compliant with the regulations and corporate policies requires a functional governance system. And that requires a rules-based semantic data structure, right? So getting back to the data management system. And here, an optimal EAI operating system, the KOS, this is the most optimal I could design, right? And so from my perspective, this is optimized. The KOS is a data-centric and human-centric EAI operating system with a flexible modular design, right? That gives you flexibility on how you install it. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's really important on how you design these systems. Hybrid cloud design is automatically tailored to the needs of each entity. Right? It doesn't need to be hybrid cloud, but that's optimal. The KOS modular architecture designed with integrity to be instantly operational. So from day one, the system and the humans are learning together, right? And augmentation begins. As you go on, and the more data that's fed into it, of course, it gets more powerful, but it starts right away from day one. And then our components, the two primary components of the KOS are the CKO engine, and that is provides easy to use governance for the entire operating system, system-wide, including access to subordinate CKO engines for partners or subsidiaries and that sort of thing. And also access to Dana, the digital assistant, which is the other major component, and provide security, curriculum, and policies throughout. So it also has organizational semantic data structure, right? And knowledge systems granularity. So that's really important is the semantic structure, the semantic data, the data structure, and how you structure that down to the granular level is super important. It's more important now with AI than it ever has been, and it's always been important. So then Dana is our digital assistant with neuroanatomical analytics. That is the digital assistant that's provided for every employee in the organization. We also highly recommend contractors. It's built in to the enterprise license because our research has demonstrated how important it is to have every employee in the organization connected. Part of that is for security, part of it is for prevention of crises, but also, knowledge sharing and accurate communications. There's many reasons to have it, and this is an excellent system for enterprise-wide and all to reach out to all the employees. And then the system learns from the employees' work, right? And so it's really important to have everybody in, no matter what their jobs are. I mean, you can have somebody in maintenance, for example, that sees a crack in a foundation. I use this as an example. The Florida condominium that fell last year, several months ago or last year. It came out a few days later that there was actually a maintenance guy that was working on the pool, and he was in the basement and he saw these new cracks form. So he took pictures, and the cracks were in the foundation. And that a few days later, the condo collapsed. So if he had been hooked up to a system like the KOS that automatically could have uploaded that, those pictures, and he was a contractor hooked up to the system, it would have automatically been delivered to the right people, and it would have prompted action, right? And so these type of things our research is demonstrated that the largest human caused or enabled catastrophes in the world over the past few decades can be prevented by the KOS and our prevention system. That's just one item, though. It could be product quality, it could be opportunities, it could be all kinds of things, not just negative, not just risk management. So personalized learning, selective knowledge sharing, prevention of crises, prescient search, work-related networking, personalized wellness programs, messaging, and generative AI. Those are the functions in Dana. And then here I talk about this is based on our KOS is based on our 15 EAI management principles. If you haven't visited our website to check out those principles, you should. The difference between our principles and AI, we shared those a couple of years ago and did a 3-video interview discussion series with our board member, long-term board member, Robert Nielsen, is because they're executable in the KOS. And we were seeing all kinds of organizations come out with principles, but they didn't have the systems to execute it, right? So we had boards in adopting principles that their organizations couldn't execute. So they don't do any good if you can't execute them, right? You physically need the ability to do it. So that's what the KOS offers, that ability. And so check out those 15 principles that we provide on our website. So security, differentiation, and sovereignty. So I combine these on one page and one chapter here that I'm just going to go through them pretty quickly. But due to the large language models, we'll call them LLMs, combined with poor data quality, generative AI in particular is inherently insecure. So I talk about that in my newsletter several times. We talk about it in some detail in the previous video and paper on introducing generative AI, the reason why you need a governance structure like the KOS for generative AI to do it safely. Not just that, any of these functions, we use several different types of algorithms that have similar risk profiles, but we compartmentalize them and we manage them very securely within the KOS. So it's really important to have a strong AI governance system in place in order to run these low risk systems and optimize the benefits. So one cybersecurity firm recently reported that 4.7% of employees have already pasted confidential information into ChatGPT. So that's 4.7% of all the employees that had installed their cybersecurity software, right? And across the enterprise. So we're talking about a very large number of people are already pasting confidential information into ChatGPT, and they can track that with their software. That's how we know that. And stunning number of people. And the organizations won't know this until later on when they do another run with the large language models, and then someone happens to, a competitor or an accident, so it might be an employee of the organization, someone asks a question or prompts the LLM bot to do something related to the organization, or even not even related to the organization, and the bot will return instructions that contain this confidential information. And so that's the most obvious one, and that's one of the reasons why, more than a dozen of the world's largest companies have banned Chat GPT. Now, it doesn't stop employees from using it at home or whatever, but it's nonetheless very high risk, and you want to avoid that. So we recommend that organizations don't allow the use of these consumer bots for enterprise, right? You need an enterprise ready system that's secure to be able to use generative AI. And that's why we introduced the function into the KOS. Is we already had the governance system in place. We already had AI systems and algorithms, similar algorithms integrated into the system. And so we already dealt with these issues conceptually from a security perspective. So, although our greatest concern for catastrophic risk is still in GAI is still biowarfare, and I talk about that elsewhere, I won't go into it here, but there's a plausible risk that many of us are very worried about. There's many other risks across the enterprise. So we were an early proponent of what's become zero trust architecture. The reality is that you can't trust, this trust but verify from the Reagan administration. It was we all supported it back then. It was great, but in the digital environment, you must have it just the opposite. You must mistrust until you can verify. Otherwise, talk to any of the leading security people, and they'll tell you that. So that's why zero trust is becoming, for example, the Department of Defense has adopted that as their official policy. Of course, getting an effective executable policy in an organization that big is a different story. It takes a long time, but that's the philosophy in our system design that we've adopted. So enterprise-wide access control, data-centric security via the CKO engine, the administrative function there. We verify all individuals, employees, and contractors. Approval for network connections, so they're connected to domains. This is not like LinkedIn or consumer. This is a work-related, highly secure environment. And so the CKO engine provides strong governance, control over subservience KOS applications and the CKO engines, and that's partner subsidiaries, consistent with zero trust policies. So relational security is another type of security that we have, behavioral analytics and pattern recognition. And then encryption, we have RSA, AES, and then we are developing our own proprietary neurosymbolic encryption that's part of our synthetic genius machine R&D that I've been working on for the past 15 years. I'm not going to go into the SGM much here, but just so that you're aware that we have a very advanced security encryption in the works. So differentiation, this gets back to business fundamentals. One of the greatest challenges facing CEOs in developing an effective AI strategy is how to differentiate in a competitive manner. So the ubiquity that provides relatively low costs and computing, software, et cetera, and interoperability also results in commoditization, right? And lack of a competitive advantage. I call this the IT commoditization paradox. This is the leading computer scientists and business analysts, consultants have been aware of this for decades. So it's not new, but it's not as well understood as it should be. Let's put it gently. And it's an extremely important topic. So in order to achieve a competitive advantage running on these commoditized systems, organizations have have had to invest a lot of money on top of customized or commoditized systems to customize and spend a lot of money, right, on top of it to customize in very rigid system. And then if you want to change it, it's very rigid and expensive. So, and then here we have chatbots come along and they're instantly commoditized the entire world, right? Your competitors have the exact same access to the exact same system, not just organization to organization and human to human, but also nation to nation, right? Has advanced AI for certain functions, generative AI, and it's instantly commoditized. So here you're spending more money. You will get some productivity out of it, but no advantage unless you learn how to use prompts or whatever. But that is why it's so important to have the KYield provides the ability to tailor functions to the needs of each entity automatically, right? In a simple to use natural language interface. So semi-automated instructions, it automatically tailors to the needs of organizations through primarily data management. Sure, there's software that runs them, but it's not a rigid system because the data is adaptive, and so that's critically important. So, and then the people in the organization provide the differentiation, right? They're work products and knowledge workers. So, and then again, the goal is to achieve a continuously adaptive learning organization. And we'll get into that more here in a second. Sovereignty, very important. Also, not talked a lot about. I mean, CIOs discuss it a little bit, business analysts, CEOs, but increasingly number of companies are subsidizing their competitors and tech vendors. And the reason is to avoid a collapse in their stock price and reversal of profit trajectory. Big tech companies mostly must continue to grow, right? And they're already so large that the only place to grow is to compete against customers. So a lot of customers, large customers of big tech companies are subsidizing more profitable companies in many cases, competitors, existing and future. So you don't want to rely too much on those companies that are your competitors for your enterprise IT, right? That's just wise policy. And then to develop other ways to achieve sovereignty over your own organization. So the KOS is designed specifically to align to the interests of the customer. I mean, it's just sometimes it would be funny if it weren't so tragic. But so continuously adaptive learning organization, we call them KLO for short. And here we have Peter on the learning organization, one of many good quotes that he has. The only sustainable competitive advantage is an organization's ability to learn faster than the competition. So that is no less true today. In fact, it's more true today than it ever has been. And you can see that it's evidenced by actually the AI scientists, right, who develop these breakthroughs. They are very, very good learners. And then those organizations where they're learning fastest are the ones that are creating the breakthroughs. So, but it's all disciplines that's more true today than it ever has been. And as enterprises move forward, the work products and the data within the organization that differentiate it, let's say a drug development company, or even a strategy in a retail company, or product lines, or knowledge about their customers. It can be anything, but that enterprise knowledge base, the quality of that reflects the knowledge of the workers, is really what's going to determine success or failure. The difference is today it's going to happen much more rapidly. It's going to be augmented with AI, right? Towards super intelligence in a few years. So failing to act on lessons learned. Again, I provide the example of in link to 9/11 just because it's the largest and most expensive example in the Phoenix memo. But we have many, we've documented dozens of situations, large catastrophes, where you had an expert in the organization that did it by the book. They did great work. They warned about a major catastrophe. It could be a corporate catastrophe, or in this case, a public situation, and it wasn't acted on in time, and a catastrophe happened. So in this case, the Phoenix memo is a classic case where the individuals on the plane were named. I mean, this was very good intel, very good work by a seasoned expert, and that was his job. And they used the system in place at the FBI, the memo, the way that they're instructed to do it, and it sat on the servers for weeks and didn't get acted upon. So that's what, and then the 9/11, which I had a little bit of effort in as a volunteer, the 9/11 Commission came out. That's one of the things that they discovered. And of course, they came out with, okay, we got to set up systems so that the knowledge is, when you have good intel, it's shared semi-automatically, automatically with the right, other agencies. There's no turf wars and all this other politics that typically get in the way, and people die because of it. And so we've taken that to a new level here with the KOS and prevention. I really think we probably have the best prevention capabilities in the world. I am admittedly biased, but it's been one of my my primary areas of research for decades, and we've done a lot of work on it. So and that has been repeated consistently over decades, not just big catastrophes either. Small everyday, smaller things that cost a lot of money and disrupt organizations and cause a lot of problems. So history has made it, very clear that organizations and nations that learn more rapidly and take the appropriate actions based on clear evidence become more successful, right? So evidence-based research, pulling as much of the political influence out of it as you possibly can from a system designer perspective, prompting correct action, providing accountability. Those are all things that any functional system needs to have if you're going to prevent these types of events. But it's also adaptive for, opportunity. It's not just catastrophes. There's, many reasons. So we started the KYield voyage while operating the leading learning network for thought leaders, which included professors, analysts, and executives from most of the world's successful organizations. That was called GWIN, and it was bleeding edge at the time. And we've continued with our R&D for 26 years since then, trying to stay ahead of everybody else. And I think we've done a really good job on that. And we're small and lean, and that's helped, and we're self-funded to this point. And I think that's also helped in many ways, because it's allowed us to allow evidence to guide us rather than the mandates of, public research. They're looking for certain things, or private research, the strings attached. So we think that the KOS is probably the best option in the world, given the state of technology and human evolution today. So the learning components to achieve a KLO, high quality data, I won't go over that again, but that's absolutely critical. Curriculum. So in the CKO engine, you can introduce third-party curriculum, internal curriculum. Our whole system, I haven't talked about it much, but it's designed to work with third-party applications and integrate. That's what we want. We want to be able to do that. We're in discussions with quite a few. So it could be anything from health and wellness to learning and specific, very specific training for individual workers. Professional networking. Dana provides a strict work-related networking function, and employs knowledge graphs. So every individual has knowledge graphs with set up for certain things, and that provides enhanced learning, visual network management, risk management functions, and also enhanced productivity. And governance is shared between the CKO engine and Dana within the corporate policy parameters. So there's some administration in the CKO engine, there's some in Dana, and then they work between each other within the governance policies. So prescient search is another function in Dana that for learning, and that is in your profile, things that are going to come up, projects in the future, things that you're training about, things you want to learn about or need to learn about. And the prescient search, when it finds something, it automatically delivers to you, and that could be as granular as you can think it, right, and describe it. And then alignment and interest. Finally, subtle but important part of the KOS design is alignment of interests between individuals and organizations through flexible settings. So that manifests in a learning organization. You need strong alignment. If you're going to have a good KLO in a company, you've got to have strong alignment of interests. So in conclusion and discussion, mostly discussion, a little bit of conclusion, we've entered a new era of automation accompanied by a variety of strategic obstacles, operational challenges, serious risks, significant opportunities. Those organizations with strong multidisciplinary teams who have invested decades of R&D in AI systems and related areas clearly have an advantage. That's very few organizations on the planet. So even in the small minority companies, though, with that level of expertise and deep expertise, their focus is usually vertically oriented on their business, right? With good reason. So I give some examples: Deere and farm automation, Google and search, ExxonMobil and energy, Caterpillar in autonomous trucks, NVIDIA in semiconductors. You could go on and on and on, but they primarily historically have used AI to become better drug development, retail pricing strategies, marketing strategies. But they don't focus on the enterprise, right? And even the large ones that have large budgets in the enterprise IT, we're not aware of any enterprise AI operating system that's comparable to the KOS. And that's because they're not focused on, the idea is not to create an operating system that would be available to their competitors, right? So we're an independent company, and the idea is have one that's generic that any company can use that automatically tailors to their organization. So that's not to say, though, that traditional companies are necessarily uncompetitive, even though they don't have an enterprise operating system enhanced with AI. And a good example here is, again, Walmart. They have become, when the CEO of Walmart said, look, we need a new operating system, and got very aggressive about competing with Amazon. Their e-commerce market is risen dramatically. They've adopted technology across. They've invested heavily, of course. They've bought some companies, spent a lot of money. But Walmart today is considered to be actually some people consider them to have the advantage over Amazon. So in a few short years, Walmart turned this around, even though they don't yet have a refined, cohesive, at least not to my awareness, enterprise operating system like the KOS. They've increased the percentage, right, of their KLO. They're continuously adaptive learning organization. They've maybe they were at a certain percentage, and they've increased it by 15 or 20% to become a more competitive company because they had a very aggressive native e-commerce competitor that was practicing very aggressive pricing. So another example is JP Morgan, and both these CEOs have been on our distribution list, like many others. Another market leader that's outperforming competitors, but with an IT budget of $14 billion, JP Morgan is also one of few that can compete with big tech on budget. So they have very large teams and deep benches that none of their competitors in banking can match, right? There's a lot of good technology people in banking, but that $14 billion budget is just enormous, and they've been able to do. I'm not necessarily saying it's the most efficient spend in the world, but it's still very, very. Neither is the big tech, right? When you're talking about that kind of money, but attempting to develop an EAI OS internally isn't a viable option for 99.9% of the organizations in the world. So hence the need for the KOS. And that, again, automatically tailors to the needs of an organization. So that it doesn't do everything, but it's going to get you, a good portion. So it's going to increase, let's say, if you're at 35% of a KLO, this will get you maybe to a 65%, something like that, maybe 75%. And then, maybe you need to do some custom stuff on top of it, right? You can build your data science team, or contractor can come in and then take off and do some very granular work in ML projects, for example, or something like that. But you're going to have the system and the data working for you to do that. So one of the most common questions that comes up in our discussions with management teams, and we've discussed enterprise operating systems with hundreds of companies over the years during our R&D phase and more recently in our commercialization phase. But why do we need a single system? Many companies are understandably worried about entrusting any single vendor with something as important as their organizational OS. And some companies, a few, have just made the decision early on that, look, we're not going to use any external vendor. We're going to build our own. Well, good luck with that. We know a few that have tried that have failed. And I think in some cases of the companies that have invested in that we've talked to, I think are investing hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? So the design is a almost pure intellectual exercise based on knowledge, based on decades of experience. And so our KOS is a tiny fraction of that expense. And I am very confident that it's actually a much more cohesive, high performance system than those that I'm discussing on a huge custom project. Now it is generic in any organization, but again, it automatically tailors to the organization with the data, adaptive data management. So it provides a differentiation. So, good luck with the NIH syndrome. And it is very well known and very common, and one of the most destructive things that can happen inside an organization, but it's still very common. But anyhow, in our, my answer is quite simple. We allowed evidence to guide us. And our research convinced us that a unified, cohesive EAI operating system enhanced with AI would become increasingly essential to remain competitive. Any such system requires seamless interoperability, right? It got to work. It's got to work together. It needs strong security, needs system-wide governance. And it has to be very engaging for people to work with. It has to be their primary app. Very difficult for an internal company to do that, right? To develop that internally. That's going to keep people engaged. And then it needs to be very easy to use interface. That took years, really. All of which strongly favors a single enterprise AI operating system. While other apps should be integrated, right? The EAI operating system needs to be the primary preferred system for learning and intelligence. That data is essential that the AI runs on, and that augments the organization. So it's absolutely critical that you have those. And that architectural design must be carefully crafted to ensure high quality and high performance. So, it's not to be taken lightly. With decades of R&D and experience designing and building these, multiple learning networks, we've developed considerable expertise and IP in this highly specialized field of knowledge systems. My lab in the 90s was called a chaos lab, a knowledge systems lab. There are very few in the world. And so there's not a lot of people with this kind of history. In fact, I recently was looking up in some of these systems in for example, graph networks in knowledge graphs. And I was amazed that in several different companies, the lead scientists that were designing the products for big tech companies building these knowledge graphs. In one case was a startup that is successful. But these knowledge graphs were created by people that I worked with 20 years ago. And they had become, and we were doing volunteer work through the W3C on standards and semantic standards, and that's sort of structured data. And it's a very small world. They've essentially gone on to build these capabilities in the world's leading companies, tech companies. So I mean, it is a very small world. We all knew each other. We're talking about, a few dozen people. So, since we refined a highly efficient, affordable, universal EAI OS and the KOS designed to protect customers, it seems wise to adopt our KOS, right? But to mitigate these risks and understand the customers, here I am, sort of lecturing people on the need for sovereignty, right? Trying to teach and how important it is. I don't want to be a hypocrite because I don't want them, they're understandably then going to be saying, well, what about you? We don't want to become dependent on KYield and lose our sovereignty. It's a valid point. And what we do is explain, well, we designed in alignment with the customers. But in order to mitigate the risk over and above that, we offer several options that helps a lot. And that includes managed KOS, where we manage it entirely, hosted in a hybrid cloud, or it can be run on most cloud providers, corporate data centers, so on their own corporate data center, or some combination. But customers can also license our KOS and manage the system internally, right? And so they're managing the data, everything internally. And all we're getting is a little bit of metadata feedback for security reasons on the system and operational things on the system. So that completely, and then the data we use, standards, so they can move the data between databases. They don't need to be locked into any cloud. It's as sovereign as you can make it from an architectural perspective, given current technology. We can support that with consulting. And then that dramatically reduces those risks and concerns. So our systems and culture, to end this presentation, are intentionally flexible to align with the needs of customers. So I will leave it there, and this will be up on our website soon. You have to look in the navigation bar, probably be on our homepage too for a while. And please look forward to any feedback you have. You can email me at markm@kyield.com. So thank you very much.